I have got to say, we started off our very first podcast interview with a good one. In today's episode, you'll be hearing my chat with Michelle Kline, pet care business coach from DogCoLaunch. I was blown away with how much goodness she shared. In this episode, we get into how she went from having a pet care business with 25 staff members to being a successful dog walking coach. We go into some big foundational mistakes that we can make as pet business owners and things to look out for. And we also get into niching down, which is a really fun topic for me since I'm a niche business myself. And I'm a big believer in what niching down can do for pet business owners, especially in today's landscape when there are pet care businesses left and right. And if you're like, no way, niching down is very limiting, Michelle addresses that in this episode with some really helpful guidance on how to navigate the process of niching in a way that can help your business grow and scale. We talk about building marketing momentum in your business, aligning your marketing with the insights of your community, yourself, and your business values, which is super valuable. And I also wanted to disclose that later in the episode, we do get into some potential trigger warnings on the topic of violence and trauma. So if you do have some little ones in the car with you, or you do not want to listen to this episode as a result, I wanted to let you know here first before we get into it. If you do want to listen but avoid that part of the episode, you can hit pause when we wrap up talking about marketing momentum, because I don't want you to miss out on the whole episode. Anyway, this is a great one, a great conversation, and I can't wait for you to listen in on our very first podcast interview.
Welcome, Petpreneur, to the Pet Marketing Unleashed podcast. I'm your host, Michaela Vargas, founder, designer, and educator behind Pet Marketing Unleashed. This podcast is all about growing your pet business without the stress. Here, you'll find episodes packed with actionable tips and advice for streamlining your online presence, avoiding burnout, and onboarding new clients while you're away from your desk or out with the dogs. So pop in those earbuds and learn stress-free marketing and website strategies with me while you head out on your next dog walk, pet sitting visit, drive to your next session, or just wherever your pet business takes you next. Let's dive in.
All right, Michelle, it's seriously such an honor to have you as our very first guest on the podcast. So welcome, and thank you so much for being willing to sit down and chat with me. I would love to start off just learning a little bit more about who you are and what you do in the pet industry.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for having me. It truly is an honor to be the first guest, and I'm very excited to be here. So I came into the pet industry in 2017, like many of us, as a bit of an accident. I was in grad school and was struggling to find work that worked with my schedule, and have always had a huge love of animals. I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family, and I just one day decided I was going to start a pet care business because how hard could it be, right? So, lesson learned, a lot harder than I expected, but that brought me into the industry. And in 2019, when I graduated, I decided to go full time. Then the pandemic hit, which I know we'll get into, but it was a wild, amazing ride. It scaled my company, horrible in many ways, of course. But for my company, I learned a lot. I ended up pivoting through the pandemic and scaling, which brought me to what I do now, which is coaching and education in the pet care space. From everything I learned in that season, I sold my company in 2023. We were at 25 employees, 600 clients, so that I could go into DogCoLaunch because I felt like there was a real need in the industry for someone that was working with pet care businesses on more niched service lines rather than growing businesses that were focusing on full service.
Yeah, and I've seen that trend a lot more lately. And I know we're going to get more into that too later on in the episode, but I first would love to kind of start off with the foundations. You've obviously at this point worked with so many different pet care businesses. What would you say are the foundational mistakes that you see the most often with pet business owners when they are first starting out with their business?
Yeah. So I would say the biggest one is this, and I really understand because I struggled with this too. That's one thing I love about the work that I get to do is I really empathize with the pet care business owner because I was one for so long. I would say the biggest thing that comes to mind is a belief that your business is not yet big enough for systems that'll support the growth. I found that you have to build the system for the growth to come. And it is a lot easier to put some of these things in place when you're smaller. So, as an example, I'm too small for software. I believed that. I was like, you know what? Google Calendar is working, text message is working. And then next thing I know, I have 9 staff members and 200 clients, and my phone never stops going off. We're missing details. And it's a lot harder to pivot the ship when you have that kind of momentum. So that's a big one. And then so on the operational side, that would be my advice. You're not too small. Investing in these systems early will honestly save you so much of a headache and so much money, it'll be great for you. And then on the marketing side, I would say not investing in a brand and building a brand early enough. A lot of people start solo. I started solo. And one of the things I'm most thankful for is the very first thing I did was go get a logo designed and kind of a brand kit pulled together in professional photography. And not only did that allow me to really stand out in my area, it allowed me to start building a brand from day one rather than a business that was centered on myself, even when I was solo. So those are the two foundational things that I wanted to mention.
I love both of those. And I feel like it's funny because I feel like so much of our advice or maybe our values in terms of how we serve pet business owners are very overlapping. And going back to that operational side of things, even as like a website designer, I see that so often when it comes to trying to get like software in place, especially with the website, right? You're investing in a website, then okay, let's get everything working for you as much as possible. And even, I do get a lot of that hesitation, especially when, well, we're smaller and we don't necessarily need this yet. And it's like, yeah, but you're doing this now. It can save so much time. And it also is a marketing aspect of it too, right? Like, do you have systems in place? Do you come off as legit because you have booking software and all of these systems? So that's super important.
100%. I also have felt that on the value alignment. I felt that from our first conversation. So that's been fun. And
Yes.
one thing I encourage business owners, just along the lines of that thought, is so often when we're stuck in this grind of the day to day, which is going to be the first season of your business and probably the longest one before you can elevate out of that, it's really hard to look forward. But when it comes to some of these decisions, like software, the website, branding, in my opinion, we really should be looking out, where do I want to be 2 or 3 years from now? Because these are the vehicles that will get us there. Like these are the investments we're making now for both the present day, but also the future day of our company.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you speak on that branding portion of it, something that, let's say you get started in, right, you're looking 2 or 3 years ahead of time. If you are focused just on on yourself in terms of when you got started and you don't have that branding, now in that rebrand process, or when you finally get that branding, you could potentially lose some of that like brand recognition, the values. Now you're hiring on people and now others don't want, clients don't like that because now you're having a team and it's changing too much it can create a lot of confusion rather than setting up with those systems ahead of time.
Yeah.
And I know,
And
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say to anybody listening, I'm going to break the fourth wall a little bit and preface Michaela did not ask me to bring up branding.
Yeah, I'm
I did
actually
that of my
surprised
own
you did.
accord. No, I'm a believer in it. So to anyone listening, I did that of my own accord. This was not a subtle, like wink, wink plug. I genuinely believe it is important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I obviously agree with you as that's what we do in this space. So, but one of the things as far as, why I wanted to reach out to you specifically is that I hear you often speak on niching down, which I love so much. I see that really trending forward in the pet space, especially when so many, I don't know if you noticed this too, or if this is something that maybe you haven't noticed, but so many pet care providers have joined the ranks in, starting in the pandemic and things like that. I see it really trending forward with people need to kind of do something different, right? Instead of having kind of like that full suite that you're talking about. And I know there's a lot of different ways to do that. So I would love to hear from you what niching down means for pet service providers, why it's so important to consider, and maybe even some examples of what a niche down business looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I'm talking to a company about niching, typically what we are exploring is, could we find a core service line that we could scale up for you? reducing a lot of operational complexity by trying to add in so many different facets of your business that aligns with a core client avatar. So oftentimes when I first start working with companies, they may have, so one thing I'll commonly hear, and I'm sure you get this too, is, well, everybody's our client. If they own a dog, we want them. And I always come back with that that's not untrue. If somebody reaches out to you and they have a dog, heck yeah, come in. If you want to pay me and your dog is safe, and, all our qualifiers, sure, I'm in. However, it's really hard to get traction in your marketing when you are trying to speak to everybody at the same time. So if you're thinking about your copy, as in your messaging, if you're thinking about the aesthetic and the feel and the vibe of your business, I have found, and a lot of the research I have done has validated, that having a core client type you're really trying to connect to won't necessarily isolate you from other client types, but it will let you get traction. So when we're looking at niching, it's both niching in, or at least the way I approach it, niching in the clients that we're really going after and the services that really meet their pain point. So sometimes, the way I did it at least, I was niching into dog walking and adventure services. I was targeting medical young professionals between the ages of 25 and late 30s, most often single women who had one dog, who had very busy schedules, and their dog was really their life partner in that season. So they wanted all these things for their dog. They're willing to invest in it, but their schedules just don't allow them to provide the type of interaction that their dog wants and needs. So that's what I mean by niching, is like really getting clear on who you're serving, the pain point that's paired with that, and then the services that meet that need really specifically.
That's such a perfect portrayal of what you can do with that. And something in terms of obviously we see this in the branding and website design side of it as well, is those people are going to be so much likely to say yes to you if you're speaking to them. If your, brand message is saying that's specifically who I'm serving, it's an easy yes, versus getting, you're trying to get that whole blanket of pet community. Again, you're not necessarily isolating them because anybody can work with you. And I even experienced that in my own industry, right? I serve, I do brand and website design for pet businesses. So now when pet businesses approach me, it's an easier yes because I know them. I know the industry. I know the business versus just your, general designer. And it works so well in the pet space, especially because it's so personal and there's so much trust involved. So if you specialize in exactly what someone's looking for, like senior dogs or small dogs, or there's so many ways that you can niche down in that. But I know that sometimes there's also some hesitancy. I don't know if you experience that too with your
Oh, yeah.
clients as well. So I'd love to talk on that. Like for those who feel like it might limit them in
Yeah.
terms of how many clients they can get because they're now niching so specific, what advice do you have for, choosing the right niche without feeling boxed in?
Yeah. So the most common, and I mean this kindly, pushback, because I work with the most amazing people. So it's like they gently raise concerns. No one is ever pushing back on me. But the biggest hesitancy that I hear people say is, I don't want to leave money on the table. And I get it. You're looking at your city and you're looking at how many pet parents are in your local area. And it feels counterintuitive to say, I'm going to go for something smaller. But my light bulb moment with this, when I was trying to figure out who was really a fit for my company, who I wanted to serve, who that quote unquote avatar was I started doing a lot of demographic research on my city and realized that the overlap in my specific community for young professionals and the medical community was 22,000 people. And we know that 66% of, last I checked, if anybody's fact checking me, could have changed. I always have to give disclaimers.
I love it.
66% of people in that age demographic are going to have a dog. So I was looking at how many clients that actually is. And this is top of head math, but somewhere around 14,000. And I was like, if I had 2,000 really good dog walking clients, that's probably a big enough business for me. To be totally candid, at least for what I wanted at that part and season of my life. And so it just occurred to me, if it's easier to get people to say yes because they feel understood, they feel seen, they have community built around your business because all their friends use you. So why wouldn't they? Because you're really niched into their community. That just feels like an easy yes to me rather than going out and trying to hustle 2,000 people that are spread out in all these different communities and places across my city. So that was the light bulb moment for me where I was like, that makes sense from a strategic standpoint.
Yeah, I love how you lay that out so like tangibly. Like this is how you know what I mean? Like taking a look at like who are you serving and what does the demographics of your community look like? And I know there's, plenty of other ways that you can niche down, right? Like if you specialize in animals with special needs, like there's so many different avenues you can take in terms of that, but like taking a look at who's in your community and seeing like you said, it seems like you're getting smaller in that way, but then when you realize, hey, if I can get, like you said, 2,000 dog walking clients, there's a business like, and getting even that small of a percentage is, I think people feel like there's not enough out there, but there are so many more people out there than we realize. Like, so many pet businesses can be successful. It's just a matter of, being able to differentiate yourself. And one of the ways to do that is niching down. Do you have any other tips for how a pet care business can position its brand to stand out and what feels like a really saturated market right now?
Oh, I love this question. So, so I'm going to start a little bit with picking who you're serving and some thoughts on figuring out who that is. And then I'll talk about some just maybe like hot tips on differentiating in this current market space, which does feel very crowded in many areas. So when you're looking at who to niche down to, this is an Alex Hormozy framework. I don't know if you're familiar. If you're watching this visually, I keep his books. He has been I keep his books behind me on my bookshelf. He has been really influential in the way in which I think about business. And he has a framework on picking your niche where we want to look for a desperate pain point in the community. So maybe before I break down this framework, we want to make sure that your niche is specific to your market. Sometimes people hear me talk about medical and they're like, well, maybe I can't have a dog walking business then because I don't have a big hospital in my area. That niche worked for me. There is a niche for you. We just need to figure out what that is relative to your specific community. So the 4 pieces that he highlights, which I contextualize to dog walking very often with my client base, we want to find a desperate pain point that's going to align with a willingness to spend on the consumer side and a lot of immediate trust. It's easier to sell something that people need versus something that they want or just enjoy. I think when we're looking at pet care services, which oftentimes can be seen as more of a luxury service line, there are a lot of people that genuinely need a dog walker or they could not be a pet owner. It's going to be easier to scale your company if you're aligned with that type of person. Second thing we want to look for is ability to afford the service. That just is what it is. If it's they need to be able to afford it. We got to be able to pay ourselves and our people. Number 3, easy to find. So ideally, if you're able to align to a certain industry or a certain zip code or something like that, that'll help you get hyper focused on where these people are. That's going to give you these marketing hooks to find these people and have kind of threads to pull and actually getting in front of them. And then the 4th thing that we want to look for is we want to make sure that at a minimum, we're in a stabilized demographic market, not a shrinking one. So for example, if you are targeting, let's say, medical professionals, and you find out one of the hospitals is closing, we may want to do a little bit of demographic research to make sure that is still a really good target avatar for you, because we need to make sure there's quote unquote enough meat on the bone. So not everyone is going to convert to your service. So we want to make sure that there's a big enough group of a specific client avatar. So we're looking for a really good somewhere in the middle to target to make sure there's enough people for you.
I love that.
Yeah. So hot tips on differentiation. Man, I could talk about this all day because it's so freaking interesting to me. But sometimes that differentiation can be a service line. Sometimes that differentiation can be like a brand positioning. People use this phrase a lot. It was less, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one that uses this phrase, but we use the tagline very often, not your average dog walker. Things like that to give the brand a really specific feel. You may appreciate this from a branding perspective. I went through a very long season where I wanted to have all of my walkers walk in like really bright 80s windsuits. And because I was like, we'll stand out. I didn't do that. I don't know. I don't know how that would have affected my staff retention if they were like, I basically have to wear a costume to work.
I would have loved it.
Right? Okay. I was like, we're going to be the edgy dog walkers.
Yes.
That's our angle. But I would say, so I'm not really big on like looking too closely at your competition, but I do think it's important to take a look at how are we unique and different because you do want to be. That's really important, especially if you're in a market that feels overly saturated or really competitive right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's actually one of the questions that we ask in our like with all of our clients is how are you like what do you do differently than, what is potentially an industry norm? Like almost what is your like controversial or like your polarizing thing that like makes you, stand apart? And typically that's where people can start to realize what it is they're most passionate about, which
Mm,
can also help them get more clients in that arena, right? Like typically whatever you're differentiating yourself with can be something you're more passionate about. It's the people you like working with. It just overall makes you happier in that regard too, right? It's an easier yes. You can get more of the people that you actually enjoy working with. Like there's so many big wins there.
I love that.
Yeah.
I really love that. I love that you'll incorporate that into your branding strategy.
Yeah, for sure. So as you were kind of talking a little bit more about the marketing, you are a specialist in building marketing momentum, which I love. So I would love to hear more about it. How can dog walkers and pet care business owners start building marketing momentum, especially if they're just starting out?
Yeah. Oh man, I could go so many directions with this. So maybe I'll pull a thread that you just mentioned about controversy. I think you have to be, so I think there's this art in marketing of knowing when to go with culture and when to move slightly against it. And that doesn't mean that I think companies need to have this like really brash angle to their marketing. They can. I see companies do it and some of them do it really effectively. But I think there's an art form in knowing when to move with the grain of a marketing strategy that maybe other companies are doing that, you think would be really effective and when it's time to differentiate and spread out into a different tactic. So some of the most effective companies that I see market have something that moves against the grain in their branding or their messaging or their copy that can either be like, it just feels like an extreme. And I think that can be really helpful in getting momentum because it catches people's attention and it just feels different and unique. So I would say, first things first, I'm thinking through how I got momentum, both with my pet care company and with DogCo, because I don't know about expert. That is very generous. It is definitely an area that I love and enjoy and put a lot of time and thought into. Just how can we get something to get traction? So things I look for is how can I incorporate some messaging that feels a little bit countercultural? So when I was getting DogCo up and going, for example, one of my main talking points that I still use because I believe in so deeply is you don't have to work 24/7 in a pet care business for it to succeed. When I pivoted my model, we went 9 to 4, Monday through Sunday, and initially, and then we kind of scaled down our weekends as well. I immediately got 54 hours back into my week while tripling the size of the company.
Wow.
And I think that can feel like a little bit like, I think more people are bought into that idea now. But I think when maybe I first started with DogCo, maybe this is just my own perception, that didn't feel quite as normalized of really consolidating a business model to be effective, to look for quality over quantity. So when you're looking at marketing momentum, I think looking for statements that resonate with people, that feel value driven, that build community and relationship, which I really love as an aspect to marketing, that also just like rub against the green a little bit on what may be normalized or accepted as a normal thing. So that's the first category. The second really is consistency and not paying attention to vanity metrics. So by vanity metrics, I mean, how many new followers are you getting? How many people are liking your posts or joining your groups? Or, of course, numbers, we want to pay attention to numbers in lead flow, but we have to give things time to work. And I work with businesses that get discouraged because they'll be really active for 2 or 3 weeks on social media. I have found it takes me often with the businesses that I've started about a year of real consistent marketing before it feels like I have traction. And so you have to be able to delay some of that dopamine to be able to stay in it long enough to let the results come.
Yeah, that's such good advice. I think we've all been like a victim to that too. Like where it's like, you try a new strategy and you're like, you're looking for the results and you've seen, this was actually a podcast I listened to recently. I don't know if you've heard of Elizabeth McCravey, but she had a recent podcast where they were kind of talking about claims that people put out there of like, this is how I made, $1 million on Instagram in 10 days, like, or like I grew my account to 100,000 followers in a week, like that can really push off a lot of people and make us feel like we're failing if we're not hitting those sort of metrics. So it's nice to hear that, that momentum can really be something that builds up over time.
For sure. And I think learning to evaluate the momentum for what really matters. Because to your point, we've all been victim to that. I certainly have been as well. And that's a mindset shift I've really tried to fight for of I would rather connect with 100 people who are really bought into what we're doing together and to the work that I want to do and the message I want to share than to have 1,000 people who are passively interested.
Yeah.
And I really believe that is better for your business. It helps you get traction. And that's the real momentum, not the metrics that where a bunch of people follow you, but maybe they're not bought into what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got to give kudos to your Facebook group. I recently joined and it's so active. It's so impressive. I feel like you really done such a good job of building a community of people. It's kind of incredible. So kudos to
Well,
you on
thank
that.
you.
So kind of pivoting a little bit, I know there's so much confusion. We're talking about marketing advice, right? But how do we figure out what we should be doing as business owners and like what aligns with us personally versus what may align with our clients? Like how do we like piece all of that together, right? Like my services with my target audience with like my own priorities. How do you bring all of that together?
Yeah. So I have this is going to sound so nerdy, but basically a 3-ring Venn diagram that I use with companies to help assess these priorities and also use it for myself. So the first ring is going to be what does the data on my service area and the people who live here tell me is a good opportunity? I really recommend that people are researching their service area, I used to go like our city would put on these State of the Union meetings once a year where the mayor would come and give a whole rundown of the economy and the businesses coming to town and they'd publish a report. And I'd be front row, like taking notes on my business, like who's coming here? What are the opportunities? So getting very data driven about your specific service area is going to open up just a lot of opportunity that you're going to start to see. The second window that I encourage people to take a look at is this is assuming you already have a business. What do you feel is working really well in your business that is just a natural strength zone? So for me, when it was 2019, I had about 10 members. Or 10 people on my team, and I was really trying to figure out where I wanted to take the business next. Dog walking is what I loved. It's what I felt like the team, I just kind of naturally built in the direction of marketing to dog walking clients and positioning us more in that direction and focusing on building that service line. And so taking a look at not only this kind of heart forward thinking of what does the business excel at? What does my team love? Where are the strengths on our team? But also taking a look at what does the data tell me? I'm really big on following the data and letting it build a story for you to make good decisions on. So where is our revenue trending? What clients seem attracted to us? What do our clients say? Surveying your clients so that you can know. And then the third area that I recommend you're evaluating is what you personally want out of your business. That's a really important component. Like your business is definitely separate from you, but at the same time, it's kind of not. And that doesn't mean you can't sell or it's not, its own thing. But that does mean that what you personally want out of the business, what brings you joy, what you enjoy, should be a consideration for you. What type of lifestyle do you want? What type of income do you want to make? And I think that's a really important component to include. So that's the framework that I use to get more clarity on what's the right opportunity for me. And where does that align? Because you bring in kind of the opportunity from the city, the opportunity inside the business, and then the part of yourself and what you want. And I have found that holding those three things in tension tends to give you a pretty clear idea.
That's perfect. I love that so much. I think that's such great advice for like all aspects of business, honestly. I'm curious for somebody who's just getting started in their business, because I know that a lot of times if, we have people coming, whatever industry it is, whether it's the pet industry or outside of the pet industry, we don't know what our passion is in terms of, you preferring dog walking, for example. So if you're just getting started, do you recommend specializing from the beginning, or is that a case where you're like, all right, let's kind of try everything and then narrowing down? How do you recommend for somebody getting started?
Okay, this is a really good question. So I can speak to what I did, which is throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what stuck and what emerged. I don't want that to be the answer though, because
Yeah.
I want people to come in with this beautiful clarity. So, okay, as my thoughts have refined as we are talking, I think if you are exceptionally skilled in identifying opportunities in your marketplace, I think if you are dedicated to doing like potential client interviews and gathering a lot of data, information, and feedback to inform a clear vision that's actually informed, I think starting with a niche service line, it's awesome because then you don't have to make any big pivots. What I liked about the spaghetti against the wall is as painful as it was to make that big pivot, I had a lot of data to pull from to make a really good decision. So I would leave that to you, listener, as you are evaluating where you are at in your business journey. The biggest thing is you need data to draw from, in my opinion, to make really good decisions about where you're taking your business. And that data is either going to come from something you've already done or from other sources that you have to be really intentional about seeking out. So from there, I leave it to you. But those are my 2 cents.
I love that. It's funny because I really do see both sides on that, especially because I think like it seems like both of us kind of got started in that arena where we did throw the spaghetti at the wall. And it's like, we did all the things. And then from there, you kind of, can figure out, okay, now this didn't serve me, this didn't serve me. And now I can find my window. And arguably, I probably wouldn't have found design if I didn't start. I started doing coaching and marketing, like social media marketing. And I like quickly realized that was not my thing. And I loved, I was doing social media, but leading people to really bad websites, so it's kind of, that's where I found that. And it kind of led me to that. So it's like, if that was your barrier to getting started because you don't feel like you have, a specialty or you don't know, it's like, at least get started. But getting some data can be super valuable. And I love that you can look in different places, right? You can look internally, you can look at what you've done, you can look at in your community and stuff like that to reel it all in and at least start with some sort of more, clearly defined baseline.
And I want to nuance one of these ideas or part of this for people listening. I think there's a fine line between gathering that data and letting yourself get into decision paralysis. So I think there is some wisdom in, like, I know myself, I'm the type of person who's going to jump in the deep end with absolutely no preparation. And as I'm sinking to the bottom, I'm like, maybe I should have looked into this more. So for me, gathering that data is hugely important because I have a tendency to jump into decisions a little bit too quickly. For a lot of people, I think they need to loosen kind of the grasp of the need for more information and just take action. So, as people are listening to this, please take some balance and nuance in that messaging, at least from my perspective, because you need to know what you're prone to so that you can kind of leverage against it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there are certain ways to get some of this information easier. I don't know if this is something that you ever recommend, but even looking at testimonials that you start to get and what language they're using, like what are what you're already getting into your business from that, right? Or on your contact form on your website, asking where people found you. So now where are these people hanging out? And specifically, where are my favorite clients hanging out? Does that give me any insight into where I can be in terms of marketing, or how come all of my favorite clients are dog walking clients versus,
Yeah.
overnight visits and things like that?
Yeah. And I think, like, along that line, just following the thread of curiosity in your business will naturally lead you to some really interesting places. So, where are my clients coming from? Why do I like doing this? I think having an open minded curiosity rarely fails you.
Yeah, that's true. It's like the joys of entrepreneurship.
The joys and the terrors.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's the real life. I know it's funny when
Yeah.
you mentioned talking about hours and how you wanted to kind of scale that back. It is funny how so many of us want to become entrepreneurs, with that side benefit of maybe not having to work as much, but then yet we set hours that are more than what we would have had as an employee in a full-time role. It's interesting how that works. Breaking that
which
stereotype is tricky.
which I actually really admire about you. The first time I emailed you and I got that beautiful autoresponder that was like, here's clarity about when I work and when I don't. I was like, oh my God, I'd be friends with her. Like the clarity and the boundaries. Well
Yes.
done.
Yes, I'm really big on systems. I love systems, and I know that's something that we share as well. So, okay, I would love to transition to something that you've been really open about with your community. And before we get into all of it, I first want to just thank you for being willing to share about this, because I do think that big unexpected experiences in our life, whether it's things like divorce or loss, trauma, accidents, physical, mental health, like you name it, they obviously impact us in really big ways, which ultimately then affects our businesses, our careers, and the way that we bring in money and sustain our livelihood. So I appreciate your willingness to talk about this right now, because it's something that we should be aware of as business owners for sure. So you went through a really traumatic experience in 2019, and it led you to going full time in your business. Would you be willing to share how your experience shaped your perspective as a business owner and impacted the way you ran your business, and then how you now, as a result, help other businesses through that sort of model?
Yeah, 100%. You may have been planning to do this in your intro, but just in case, dear listener, if you have children in the car, this might be a time to listen to this later. So, just a little bit of a trauma trigger warning for you and little ears. So, back in 2019, I was finishing up my graduate degree in social work. And at the time, my business was this beautiful side hustle that I thoroughly enjoyed. I still laugh a little bit that I considered it a side hustle because I had like 8 team members. Like, uh, who does that with a side hustle? But that is the mental category I had
Okay.
for it at the time. And my grand plan at the time was, well, it's funny, I haven't thought about this in a while. My grand plan at the time was to graduate, go full time into social work. And then I actually was exploring how I had some really phenomenal people on my team. So I was exploring how I could turn the business into a co op to let other people kind of join together and build together, and then kind of exiting myself. And in 2019, I was out on a walk, actually at my internship, not relative to my dog walking company, in the middle of the afternoon. And I was attacked by a random stranger. I clearly survived, but had some pretty physical trauma. It, yeah, I had some pretty significant physical effects from that. Thankfully, I'm still able to walk and do all the things that I love to do and move my body. But there's a window of time where that was really unclear if that would be the case. And I all of a sudden had this huge internal conflict because my specialty in social work was in community violence. And so all of a sudden, I felt real identification with the people that I had been working to serve. And it just felt like, and no one told me this, just so you know, like no one was like, you can't do this. But I felt ethically compromised in moving forward with the plan that I had when I really should have been participating in groups, not leading them. And so I felt like I had all these options stripped away from me. I was 6 weeks out from graduation. And I was like, I think the best thing to do would be to take a year, come into my business, focus on this full time, see what I could build, and revisit this plan A down the road and just see if I ever want to re enter into that. And it was a very confusing time because I had invested so much time and work into this degree, into a field that I did love. And yeah, it's weird to look back on because I love what I do now. I love the way this all turned out. And also, a lot of it was born out of this really traumatic experience that took a bit to navigate. So, when I work with companies, one, I really try and communicate to people. I don't believe there are shoulds when it comes to your relationship with the business. I don't think you should feel like you have to do any particular thing. I don't think you should be in a different place than you are. Anytime I hear any type of kind of shame rhetoric coming up when it comes to how far along you are, what your revenue is at, I see it as an opportunity to kind of bring some balance to that perspective of you're here, you're showing up, and it's all going to work out the way it's supposed to. And that we're on this journey together, and that's going to be freaking hard. And I never want to diminish that. But it's funny, I get feedback oftentimes that like positivity is something that I am really known for, and that's intentional. I am a very positive person, but I also want to bring balance to that since I'm sharing from this perspective. That positivity really comes out of surviving a really horrific experience and still believing that things worked out the way they were supposed to. And then it turned out really, really good. And so I hope to imbue that in the work that I do and also imbue this sense of like, if it's not going the way that you want, I really get that. We can still make this effing awesome. If you need to drop that or cut that out, that's totally fine. That
Heck
kind
no,
of
you're
just slipped
good.
out.
You're all good.
So yeah, those are some immediate thoughts about it.
Thank you again for being willing to share. Do you find that this impacts like when you are coaching and setting up systems and the ability for people to be prepared for life and, just life? Like, do you find that as something that you include in things that coach with your clients?
Yeah, the ethic of it, 1,000%, because you never know what will happen. I mean, this was 3 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon where like, there's no reason this happened. It was out of absolutely nowhere. And I had several hours for the rest of the day where I was like, I don't know if I can still walk. I don't know what's going to happen next. Everything was in jeopardy. I mean, at the risk of being overly transparent to the listener, I hope I'm not traumatizing anyone, but I really didn't know if I was going to survive. There was a very long moment where I was like, I think I actually am dying. And that really informs the way that I work with companies now because you never know what's going to happen. And for a lot of people I work with, this business is not only their livelihood, it's their retirement plan, it's their generational wealth plan of what they're leaving to their kids and supporting their family. Their spouse may work with them. And so it's like supporting a lot of people. And it needs to be able to survive without you. And for you to have the space to be a human when stuff happens. Hopefully not what I went through. I would hope that never happens to anyone I ever work with. But if you get sick suddenly, or if you total your car and don't have access to get to appointments, whatever it may be. So when I am working with clients, I really encourage them to decentralize the owner out of the systems that you're building. And that doesn't mean we want to be distanced from our business. So many people I work with do this work because they're passionate. But I think there's also this very real sense of building your business to be able to work without you only gives you options. It gives you financial security no matter what happens to you. It gives you the ability to sell if you ever want or need to. And I'm very passionate about people leaving that option on the table. Even if you never take it, I want you to be prepared that you could if you need to, because we don't know what's going to happen. So it definitely informs my work. I don't talk about it super often, mostly because I'm aware of what it can bring up for other people. A lot of people have their own experiences that I want them to feel a lot of freedom to leave at the door and that it's not too close. But the other reason is I never want it to in any way diminish the work I do with DogCo because I freaking love what I do. I love every single thing about it. And so I never want people to feel like I'm here because something didn't work out. Something didn't work out and I'm choosing to be here and I love it.
That's incredible. I love that so much. And I can feel your passion. Like anytime you show up anywhere, I can feel it. So that's super awesome. We didn't prepare for this question, but I was just curious if you have any follow-up tips for pet business owners who feel really hesitant to kind of take that step back, even if they want to, right? Because I mean, there's so many effects of that, maybe internally with your team. Sometimes there's that dynamic of, all right, I'm working less, but everyone else is working more. Now, how do I manage that dynamic in terms of, for lack of a better word, just like maybe respect or, being a good boss, but also trusting, right? That things are, going to be handled properly. Like, do you have any tips for people that are kind of potentially considering that sort of transition or maybe wanting to step back, but have a lot of concerns?
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing that comes to mind is I encourage people don't step out till you've built the system to support it without you. I think sometimes we put the cart before the horse and it's tempting to do that where it's like, oh, that makes sense. It should run without me. I'm going to take a step back. And it's like, wait. Somebody's still got to help your team. We need somebody holding your team accountable. We need somebody there to support and build the client experience. So there is a season of actually being more involved, I think, to build what's going to support the infrastructure of your company before you step out. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I was listening to a podcast that Alex Ramosi put on. Surprise, surprise. And he was talking about when you're building a business, there's a window of time where you are both working your current job and you're working your future job, because that's what it takes to get your business to the next level. So I say that to normalize if anyone is feeling a sense of guilt for stepping out or for maybe taking a season that's a bit slower, you've already put in the work and the time. This is you catching up, in my opinion. This is you bringing in some rest and restoration for the work you've already done. And that's not a bad thing. I think that's a really healthy thing.
Yeah, for sure. It's honestly to be quite transparent. I'm kind of in that season of, I was the sole person in this business and now we're kind of going more of that, smaller agency type model. And it's been something that I've had to navigate and kind of stepping back while sounds nice. In theory, it's, really scary in a lot of ways. And there is a lot of that guilt that comes into play. And I know a lot of pet business owners are experiencing that too in that sort of transition. But, that's kind of the beauty of entrepreneurship as well.
Yeah.
So, all right. Before we wrap up, I'd love to start a tradition on my podcast of ending each episode by asking something of guests that I'm super passionate about, and that's stress and burnout. So I'd love to know your biggest piece of advice or tip or best practice that you do in your life when it comes to managing stress or burnout in business.
Yeah. So I thought about this question because you sent it ahead of time and I was like, that's a good one. So Okay, two things come to mind. The first is I think it's helpful to know what season you're in. So I'm a big proponent. Some people operate really well with like a 50-50 work life balance that they're really strict with. And I think that's awesome if that's a system that works for you. There is no right or wrong here. For me, I operate best with like a hard sprint season and a rest season. And that's the cycle that I try and put in place for myself. And so when I am in a sprint season, remembering that and remembering that this isn't for forever, it's a choice I'm making for now has been really helpful. The second thing that came to mind is definitely a mindset thing, which I know can sound a little woo woo, but one thing I really try and remind myself is I am choosing to be here. Everything I'm experiencing right now is from a situation that I hoped for and I worked towards and I wanted and I envisioned and took a lot of risk to get here. And so when something is stressful, I try and anchor against one, this isn't the worst thing you've gone through, even if it feels like it. There is that reality of like, you've handled worse. It'll be okay. And then the second thing being, I'm choosing to be here. No one forced this upon me. Nobody told me I had to do it or else. I want to be here. So that helps me manage the stress.
I like that. So speaking of sprint season, I'm assuming that a sprint season is when your mastermind program starts. I'd love to learn a little bit more about your mastermind program. Can you tell us a little bit more who it's designed for and some of the biggest takeaways that I don't know if you call them like students or clients and participants, what they can expect?
Yeah, 100%. So the main focus of my company is my mastermind, where twice a year I open up for cohorts of 20 companies at a time to work together for 12 months. There are no competitors in your group, and we focus on bringing your business through a season of scale and really a sprint season. It's intensive. We do a lot of work, but it's geared towards helping team based companies get to the next level to build the operations to support that growth, to identify the right lead flow and target client avatar to get some real momentum in their marketing, and to build it in a way that protects the time freedom of the owner. That doesn't mean we're not working hard. We are. But we're working to build your company in a way where you're not. I always think about that SpongeBob meme where he's face down, he's like dragging himself across the floor. That's not the vibe we're going for. We want you to feel in control of the growth. We want you to feel that you are a participant in it and making those calls and intentionally choosing the direction of the business rather than kind of sitting behind the reins of a runaway horse. So the mastermind is geared towards that. And our next group launches in January. So I'm actively starting to kind of open up that marketing and share that with people. It's definitely a sprint season, but it's one I'm really, really hype about.
Yeah.
So things that what was the end of your question?
No, what they're just their biggest takeaways and like basically what they can expect in their takeaways. I feel like everything you already described too is like, that sounds incredible.
Yeah. So it's 12 months of working really closely together, 50% on operations, 50% on marketing, all in a community of people who are also taking big risks and going for big growth. I really thought through the support, resources, and community that I wished I had had when I was growing my company as quickly as I did to support other people through a similar season. So, as part of that, it comes with all of the SOPs from my business. It comes with up to like 6 hours together a week. If that freaks you out, don't worry. You don't have to hang out with me that much, but it's an option if you really want a lot of support and the ability to really get to know other business owners who are in a similar season of growth, but not a direct competitor. So that's kind of the highlights. But if anybody is interested in learning more about it, I'd love for you to send me an email. It's Michelle@DogCoLaunch.com. I'd love to explore if it might be a good fit for you.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. Besides the email, where can our listeners find you online? How can they connect with you to learn more? I know you have your Facebook group, which is incredible. So where can everybody connect with you?
Yeah. So aside from my website, which is dogcolaunch.com, and my email, michelle@dogcolaunch.com, the best place would be in the Facebook group. So I run a free Facebook group. It's called Grow Your Daily Dog Walking Business with DogCoLaunch. And that is a free resource to business owners that are looking to scale their business, specifically in dog walking, but any pet care business is welcome. I run free challenges. I do webinars. I live stream on a weekly basis. People are in there asking questions and figuring out problems together, encouraging each other. I strive for it to be a really supportive, innovative place on the internet. So would love to have you join us there.
Yeah, and I can vouch for this being a really awesome group. Like I've totally slacked, I've got to be honest, on my Facebook group. But anyway, I saw yours. I'm like, it is so incredible how engaged your community is. So if you are a listener and you're listening to this, I highly recommend checking out her Facebook group because it is a really positive one, a very active one, and she gives a lot of value in there too. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I'm excited for this episode to launch.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Pet Marketing Unleashed podcast all the way to the end. You're the best. If you loved what you heard, please share the podcast with your pet biz friends. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review. We love to hear what you think of the show, and we are so grateful for all the support and love you show by sharing the podcast with others. And don't forget to stop by our website, petmarketingunleashed.com, where you'll find a ton of resources, recommended tools, blogs, templates, courses, and more to help you grow a stress-free and fulfilling pet business. Here's to saving time, ditching the stress, and standing out from the pack. Thanks again so much for listening, and I will be back soon with a new episode. Bye for now.